Unaware pregnant wife is now married to a trillionaire and the richest man in the country. He splashed her mud water. Clara felt the cold mud hit her heavily pregnant stomach before she saw his face. That same face that once whispered, "I love you," in a hospital room where their son died in her arms. The impact was sharp and freezing, the sludge soaking through her thin maternity dress and clinging to the swell of her belly. For a moment, the world went silent. This was a miracle baby. The child doctors said would never happen after the trauma of losing her first. Every kick from within was a prayer answered. And now, the icy shock of the street water made her breath hitch in a panicked sob. She cradled her stomach, her fingers shaking as they brushed against the gritty residue of the gutter. This was the Daniel who used to bring her wild daisies because he couldn't afford roses. There were nights they spent on a sagging mattress in a studio apartment, dreaming of the day his logistics startup would take off. He used to press his forehead against Hayes and swear that no matter how much money they made, she would always be his North Star. But money didn't just change Daniel, it replaced him. "Look at you," a voice sneered, cutting through the sound of the drizzling rain. Clara looked up. Leaning out of the window of a pristine, obsidian-black SUV was Daniel. His suit cost more than her father's house. His eyes, once warm with shared dreams, were now cold and filled with a terrifyingly casual malice. He didn't look like a man who had once stayed up 3 days straight holding her hand while she mourned their firstborn. He looked like a predator who had forgotten he was ever prey. Still wandering the streets like a beggar. "Clara?" Daniel laughed, the sound jarring against the quiet street. "I see you found someone else a burden with a child. Let's hope this one has a stronger heart than the last, for your sake." The cruelty of the remark was a physical blow. He didn't even know. He didn't know that the humble life she appeared to lead was a choice of peace, not a lack of means. He didn't know that the simple man she had married months ago was Marcus Stanley, a man whose name was whispered in the hallways of power, a man who owned the very bank that held Daniel's corporate debt. What gave Daniel the audacity to splash his ex-wife with muddy water? How did he fail to realize that the woman he just humiliated is now the wife of a trillionaire? And how will he react when he discovers that this singular, hateful action is about to crumble his entire business empire? Because, unbeknownst to him, Clara's new husband is a primary investor keeping Daniel's company from total liquidation. To understand the poison in Daniel's heart, you have to look back at the final year of their marriage. It wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow, agonizing erosion. As Daniel's business began to see its first sparks of success, his humanity began to dim. Clara remembers a Tuesday she sat in the hallway of the clinic, her hand on a flat stomach that felt empty and aching. It was her third appointment for a high-risk pregnancy screening. She had texted him 10 times. "I can't make it, Clara." He had finally barked over the phone, the sound of a bustling office in the background. "The regional director is here. If I leave now, we lose the contract. Do you want a husband or do you want a bank account? Because you can't have both today." Clara had sat there, surrounded by couples holding hands, feeling like a ghost. She spent her prenatal journey in waiting rooms alone, reading pamphlets about stress management while her husband was busy managing assets. The business didn't just come first. It became the only thing. The low point, the moment the foundation truly cracked, was the night of the Founders' Gala. Clara had been suffering from severe morning sickness and a fluctuating blood pressure that left her dizzy. "I need to go to the hospital. Daniel," she had whispered, clutching the edge of the vanity. "Something doesn't feel right." Daniel was busy adjusting his silk tie in the mirror. He didn't even turn around. "You're always not feeling right when it's a big night for me. It's psychological. Clara, you're intimidated by my success. Take an aspirin and put on the red dress. We have investors to impress." That night, while Daniel toasted to unlimited growth, Clara sat in a bathroom store at the venue, clutching her stomach and crying in silence, terrified she was losing another piece of her soul. He had traded her health, her peace, and their shared mourning for a seat at a table that would eventually eat him alive. When the divorce finally happened, Daniel had laughed. He told her she was stagnant water and he was a rushing river. He left her with nothing but the clothes on her back and a heart so shattered she thought it would never beat for another person again. But fate has a wicked sense of irony. Standing there on the sidewalk, mud dripping from her coat, Clara watched Daniel's SUV speed away, his laughter still ringing in her ears. He thought he had won. He thought he was a king of the world, looking down at a woman he had successfully discarded. He had no idea that when she got home, she wouldn't be returning to a cramped apartment. She would be returning to a private estate where Marcus Thorne was currently looking over a merger file, a file that contained Daniel's name, his company's logo, and a signature line that Marcus was about to leave blank. Daniel had just splashed mud on the one person who could have saved him. And in the world of the ultra-rich, an insult to the queen is a death sentence for the peasant. The heavy iron gates of the Stanley estate swung open silently, but inside the luxury SUV that had picked Clara up moments after the incident, the silence was deafening. Clara sat in the back seat, her hands still trembling as she clutched a plush cashmere blanket around her mud-stained dress. The chauffeur, a man of few words named Elias, had seen the encounter from a block away. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. He knew, as everyone who worked for Marcus Stanley knew, that the woman in the back was the center of the Trillionaire's universe. As the car pulled into the sweeping circular driveway, the front doors of the mansion burst open. Marcus Stanley didn't wait for his staff. He didn't care about the cold evening air or the fact that he was in the middle of a high-stakes call with the Tokyo Stock Exchange. He had seen the security feed from the gate. When he saw Clara, covered in drying sludge, her eyes red-rimmed and her pregnant belly trembling, Marcus felt a cold, predatory rage he hadn't experienced in a decade. "Clara," he breathed, reaching her in 3 long strides. He didn't care about the mud. He scooped her into his arms, his $10,000 suit soaking up the dirty water from her clothes. "What happened? Are you hurt? Did the car hit you?" "I'm okay, Marcus," she whispered, her voice cracking. It was Daniel. He saw me. He did it on purpose." Marcus went deathly still. The name Daniel acted like a match dropped into a pool of gasoline. He knew the history. He knew about the hospital room where Clara had stood alone over a small casket while Daniel was closing a warehouse deal. He knew about the years of neglect. "He saw you were pregnant?" Marcus asked, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm octave. "He mocked me, Marcus," he said. He said he hoped this baby had a stronger heart than the last one. The air around Marcus seemed to freeze. To insult a grieving mother was one thing, but to weaponize the death of a child, his wife's child, was a declaration of war. Marcus tucked a stray, damp hair behind Clara's ear. "Go inside. Dr. Aries is already on his way to check the baby. I want a full report on your vitals. I'll be up in a moment." He watched her go, waited until the doors closed, and then turned to Elias. "I want the dashcam footage from the pickup," Marcus said, "and call the head of our private equity wing. Ask them about the Apex Logistics merger. I believe the CEO, Daniel Cash, is looking for a $50 million infusion by Monday morning to keep his ships in the water." Elias nodded. "And the instructions, sir?" Marcus looked out at the rain, his eyes dark and hollow. "Tell them to halt all communication. No, better yet, tell them we are interested, but we want a personal meeting. I want him to come here. I want him to see what a real king looks like before I take his crown. How far would you go to protect the person you love? Is Marcus being too cruel, or is Daniel finally getting the karma he spent years building up? And what will happen when Daniel walks into Marcus Stanley's office, thinking he's about to get a check, only to find the woman he splashed with mud sitting in the power chair? Inside the mansion, Marcus sat by Clara's side as the doctor performed a portable ultrasound. The rhythmic thump-thump of the baby's heart filled the room. "The baby is fine, Marcus," Clara said softly, reaching for his hand. "He's a fighter." "He shouldn't have to be a fighter at 7 months in the womb," Marcus replied, kissing her knuckles. "He should be safe. You should be safe." He stayed with her until she fell into a restless sleep, but his mind was already moving like a grandmaster on a chessboard. He went down to his private study, a room lined with leather-bound books and screens displaying global markets. On his desk sat the file for Apex Logistics. Daniel Cash was drowning. He had over-leveraged his company to buy that obsidian black SUV and the penthouse he bragged about. He needed Marcus Stanley's investment to pay his staff by the end of the month. Without it, the logistics king would be filing for bankruptcy within 30 days. Marcus pulled up the dashcam footage Elias had sent. He watched the video of Daniel's car swerving intentionally into the puddle. He heard the muffled sound of Daniel's laughter. He watched Clara stumble, clutching her stomach in terror. Marcus replayed the clip of Daniel's laughter 3 times. "You think poverty is a joke, Daniel." Marcus whispered to the empty room. "You think she's still the woman who has to take your abuse? You're about to find out that the woman you discarded is now the woman who owns your future." He picked up his phone and dialed his lead auditor. "Start the deep dive on Apex Logistics. I want every tax discrepancy, every late payment to vendors, and every safety violation. By tomorrow morning, I want Daniel Cash to feel the ground shifting beneath his feet. Start by pulling our support from his primary shipping insurance. Let's see how he likes navigating a storm without a life jacket." The wheels of justice were turning, but they weren't turning for the law. They were turning for a husband's revenge. The next morning, Daniel Cash woke up to a nightmare. His phone was blowing up. His lead investor had pulled out. His insurance premiums had tripled overnight. And a mysterious Stanley group had just bought up 40% of his company's outstanding debt. He was frantic. He didn't know who Marcus Stanley was personally. Few people did. But he knew the name was his only hope. He called his secretary. "Get me a meeting with the Stanley group. I don't care if I have to crawl there. Tell them I'll sign whatever they want. I just need the capital." Little did he know, he wasn't going to a meeting. He was going to a reckoning. The gates of the Stanley estate didn't just open for Daniel Cash. They seemed to swallow him whole. As his SUV, the same one that had splashed Clara just 24 hours prior, crawled up the mile-long driveway, Daniel felt a knot of anxiety tightening in his chest. He had spent his morning fielding calls from panicked board members. His credit lines were frozen. His main shipping hub was under emergency audit. And the only name on everyone's lips was Stanley. He stepped out of the car, adjusting his blazer with a sense of self-importance that was rapidly fraying at the edges. He looked up at the limestone columns and the sprawling architecture, a sting of envy hitting him. This was the level of power he craved. He imagined himself shaking hands with Marcus Stanley, 2 titans of industry making a deal. He had no idea he was entering an abattoir. "Mr. Cash?" "This way," a stern-faced assistant said, leading him not to a corporate office, but through a hallway lined with priceless Renaissance art. Daniel was led into a massive sunroom that overlooked a private lake. The room was breathtaking, but his eyes were immediately drawn to the man standing by the floor-to-ceiling window. Marcus Stanley was taller than he looked in the magazines, radiating a quiet, terrifying authority. But it was a woman sitting in the armchair beside him that made the blood drain from Daniel's face so fast he nearly stumbled. There sat Clara. She wasn't in the mud-stained maternity dress from yesterday. She was draped in royal blue silk that flowed over her pregnant belly like water. Her hair was perfectly styled, and on her finger sat a diamond so large it seemed to hold its own light. She looked radiant, healthy, and, most shockingly, untouchable. "Clara," Daniel stammered, his brain refusing to process the image. What are you doing here? Are you working the domestic staff now? I told you, Marcus Stanley is a busy man. You can't just—" "Sit down, Daniel," Marcus interrupted. The voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a falling mountain. Daniel sat today. His knees felt like water. "Mr. Stanley, I apologize for the interruption. My ex-wife, she has a habit of showing up where she isn't wanted. I'll have security remove her so we can discuss the investment." Marcus didn't move. He walked over to Clara, placed a protective hand on her shoulder, and leaned down to kiss her temple. "You're mistaken, Daniel. You are the one who is currently where he isn't wanted. And as for the investment, you're not here to negotiate. You're here to account for yourself." Wow! Can you imagine this moment? Daniel realizing that the beggar he mocked is the woman who holds his entire life in her hands? Why do men like Daniel only realize a woman's value when she is backed by a more powerful man? And wait until you see what Marcus had prepared for the second half of this meeting. It's a lesson in humility that Daniel will never forget. "I don't understand," Daniel whispered, the walls of his reality beginning to crumble. "Clara, what is this?" Clara looked at him, and for the first time there was no pain in her eyes. No longing, no hurt, just a profound, quiet pity. "Yesterday, Daniel, you asked if this baby had a stronger heart than the last one. You splashed me with mud and laughed because you thought I was small. You thought I was alone." She stood up slowly, Marcus's hand never leaving her. "I am the wife of Marcus Stanley. I am the mother of his heir. And more importantly, I am the woman you tried to break for 10 years. You didn't realize that when you were busy building your empire on my back, I was the one holding the foundation together. Without me, you are just a man with a leased car and a mountain of debt." Marcus stepped forward, dropping a thick folder onto the coffee table in front of Daniel. "I spent my morning looking at your books, Daniel. Or should I say, your creative fiction? The Stanley Group now owns your debt. We own your warehouses. We even own the title to the SUV you like to drive through puddles." Daniel scrambled to open the folder. His eyes darted over the legal documents. It was all there. A total hostile takeover, executed in less than 12 hours. "You can't do this," Daniel gasped. "This is personal. You're destroying a multi-million-dollar company over a splash of water." "It wasn't just the water, Daniel," Marcus said, his eyes darkening. "It was the 10 years of neglect. It was the hospital room where you left her alone. It was every prenatal appointment you skipped to chase $1. I am an investor, and I've decided that your company is a toxic asset because the man at the helm is a moral vacuum." Marcus leaned in closer, his shadow looming over the terrified man. "Here's the deal. You will sign over your remaining shares to a trust fund in the name of the child you mocked. You will walk out of here with nothing but your dignity, if you can find any. Or I can hand this second folder to the federal auditors waiting in my lobby. They are very interested in your offshore tax shelters." Daniel looked at the pen on the table. He looked at Clara, who was now looking out at the lake, completely bored by his presence. He had come here expecting a lifeline. Instead, he had found a noose. "Clara, please," Daniel pleaded, his voice breaking. "We were family once. You know what I put into that company. Tell him to stop." Clara didn't even turn around. "I tried to tell you for years that people matter more than profits, Daniel. You didn't listen then. Why should I listen to you now?" With shaking hands, the man who thought he was a king picked up the pen. He signed away his life's work, one page at a time, while the woman he had discarded watched the sunset over her new empire. The scratch of the pen against the heavy bond paper sounded like a bone snapping in the quiet room. Daniel Cash, the man who had once stood on podiums and lectured young entrepreneurs about ruthless efficiency, was now a broken man signing his own professional death warrant. As he scribbled his name for the final time, relinquishing Apex Logistics to the Stanley Group, he looked up at Marcus, hoping for a shred of mercy. He found none. "The SUV is parked out front," Marcus said, his voice as cold as a winter grave. "You will find a bus pass in the glove compartment. The vehicle is being repossessed as of 60 seconds ago. My security will escort you to the edge of the property. I suggest you don't look back." Daniel scrambled to his feet, his face a mask of sweaty desperation. He turned to Clara, one last pathetic attempt at manipulation dancing in his eyes. "Clara, you're a mother. You're supposed to be the compassionate one. You're really going to let him do this? To leave me with nothing?" Clara finally turned to him. The blue silk of her gown shimmered as she moved, highlighting the life growing within her. "You left me with nothing every single day for 10 years, Daniel. You left me with an empty bed, an empty nursery, and an empty heart. Today, the world is simply balancing the scales." As security lifted Daniel by his elbows and dragged him toward the door, he began to scream. He screamed about his legacy, about how he built everything from scratch, and about how unfair it was. His voice faded as the heavy mahogany doors clicked shut, leaving the sunroom in a blissful, weighted silence. Marcus walked over to Clara and wrapped his arms around her from behind, his palms resting gently on her stomach. "He's gone, Clara. He can never touch you, speak to you, or even be in the same zip code as you ever again." "It feels strange," Clara whispered, leaning her head back against his shoulder. "For so long, I thought his power was absolute. I thought I was lucky just to have his scraps. How did I ever believe a man so small was a giant?" "Because he spent 10 years making sure you never saw a mirror," Marcus murmured. "But I have one more thing for you. A gift that isn't about money or companies." He led her to his desk and opened a small, velvet-lined box. Inside wasn't jewelry, but a flash drive and a single, yellowed piece of paper. When I started looking into Daniel's downfall, Marcus explained, I hired the best private investigators in the country. I didn't just want his money. I wanted the truth about why you were alone in that hospital 3 years ago. You told me he was at a meeting with the regional director. Clara nodded, the memory of that cold hospital hallway rushing back. He said if he left, the company would fold. I believed him. I died a little that night so he could succeed. Marcus's jaw tightened. He wasn't at a meeting. Clara, I found the GPS logs from his car that night and the credit card statements. He was at a jewelry store 3 towns over. He wasn't buying a contract. He was buying a diamond tennis bracelet for his mistress, the secretary he promoted 2 weeks later. The air left Clara's lungs. The betrayal she had lived with was a lie layered upon a lie. He hadn't chosen his business over his dying son. He had chosen a cheap thrill. And the paper, she asked, her voice trembling. It's a deed, Marcus said, his eyes softening. I bought the old clinic where you used to wait for your prenatal appointments alone. I've ordered it to be torn down. In its place, we are building the Clara Stanley Maternal Wellness Center. It will be a place where no woman ever has to sit in a hallway alone, where the husbands are vetted, the care is free, and the miracle of life is treated with the respect you were denied. Clara broke then, not into the jagged, ugly sobs of the past, but into tears of profound release. Marcus held her, a trillionaire who would have burned the world down just to see her smile, as she let go of the last ghost of Daniel Cash. Meanwhile, outside the gates, Daniel stood on the sidewalk. The rain began to fall again. He reached into his pocket for his phone to call a cab, only to realize the service had been disconnected. He looked at the bus pass in his hand. A sleek, black SUV, one exactly like the one he used to own, drove past, hitting a puddle. The muddy water splashed up, soaking his expensive suit and his pride. He stood there, wet, broke, and utterly alone, watching the lights of the Stanley estate glow like a fortress on the hill. The lesson was complete. You can build a kingdom of gold, but if it's built on the tears of the innocent, it will eventually turn to dust.